Hey for checking out the Rugby Rant podcast show.
Well, thank you very much to Scott Barrett for doing that little bit for us. But we've got a Rugby Rant show today, and I want to welcome all our fans back to this. Actually, it's a Thanksgiving edition of the Rugby Rant. I want to wish Scott and his family a wonderful Thanksgiving. Hope they enjoy the time together. I know it's precious and important when you got a family like Scott does. So for those that don't know, this week's episode, we're taking on Scott Lawrence, head coach of the USA Eagles. And we're going to be talking about basically 2025, breaking it all down. First, for fans, I want to address a couple of things. First of all, I want to thank Tim Brown and the folks at Macron for their support. They can produce some great kit for you guys. Scott knows this as his Eagles were dressed for success and Macron product, but they can produce apparel for all your team's needs. And the thing I love about Macron is they always have a store up. So anytime a new player comes into the fold, they can get access, they can get their stuff, and within 2 to 3 weeks, they'll get their goodies right at their doorstep for them to use. That's a far contrast and a vast contrast between some of the other providers who, it has to be in a certain time window. So I love Macron products, and they produce some nice array of goods, and their price points can be very competitive for your teams. That being said, I'd also like to let fans know Scott and I are going to be, Scott, the big guy, Ferrara, that is, are going to be taking a hiatus for the next month, for the month of December. Just to kind of gather our bearings and get ready for season 7 of the Rugby Rant podcast show. And one of the things we're going to be coming back with in January is I'm going to be working on over this hiatus at getting all the GMs from the various MLR teams to come on and just talk about roster management, building rosters, managing the new terms for the 2026 season. So bear with us, but join us back in January where we sit down with the GMs. I'm looking forward to it. It's always a pleasure. I've already talked to Clarkey from Seattle, so he'll be our first starting in January. But nevertheless, I want to introduce this man, the man of the hour. That is head coach USA Eagles, Scott Lawrence. And before we talk to Scott, I just want to let everybody know who is maybe not familiar with his career and where he's come from. About both his playing and his coaching career. He played in Europe for Halifax in the UK, played for Grand Rapids here in Michigan, not far out of the Midwest, and of course at LifeU, someplace that's probably still pretty close to his heart. Played at USAAs, and he was Eagle number 364, had 5 caps with the USA Eagles in the, I think, mid-aughts, if I'm not mistaken. And then after his playing career, he went on to coach at Life University, where he won a national championship. I believe Cam Dolan was on that team, if I'm not mistaken. Scott, is that right?
That's right. Yep.
Big fan of Cam, a good friend. Coach the USA U20s, that storied flight back from Kazakhstan or someplace god awful like that. Maybe it was Georgia. There we go. Yeah. Well, it's a place that Scott's visited often. Maybe he's 2 worse from where from that one. But anyway, came back in that storied flight and made a plan to set about being successful in the U20s camp, and followed that up with success the following. Was that a year later or 2 years later, Scott?
2 years later. Yeah.
2 years later. Coach USA Selects. He was USA Defense coach, then went on to be more or less the GM and the coach of Rugby ATL right there in Atlanta. And then he was the interim USA Rugby head coach, and then became the head coach in 2024. So this is, Scott, this is your 3rd appearance on the Rugby Rant. You're almost becoming a regular. I should, send you a T-shirt or a sweatshirt or something like that.
That would be nice. Kid is always good.
Yeah, I hear that. So we're going to get straight away. We're going to get into it a little bit. And one of the things we're going to be talking about, folks, I'm going to post this up here, but Scott will post this for everybody to actually click and access. We're going to be talking a bit about a coaching culture podcast. Scott asked me to take a look at it. I found it very engaging. But Ben During, the host, sits down with former Wallaby Ben Darwin, and they talk a bit about coaching culture. And there's some really interesting nuggets in there. So I'd encourage you to check that out if you have an opportunity, if you're a coach yourself or you're interested in how culture in teams is created. Check out the link below or take a look at the Coaching Culture podcast. It's worth a look. And Scott was on it a few months back, so you can get more from him on that podcast show. So nevertheless, let's get into it. Before we dig deep, and as we dig deep, I think there are a couple bits that I'd just like to hit upon, Scott. I know KPIs, key performance indicators, are a huge part of rugby and a lot of performance sport. We're obviously in the middle of Project Gemini, kind of 3 of those stages in your Project Moonshot that you came up with and developed. And I'm just going to review kind of the 3 major big plays within Project Gemini. And here's what I'm asking, Scott. I want you to take each one of these 3 big plays and just tell me, give a grade of where the Eagles are at, where your management team is at in each of these 3 areas. We'll go school, because I'm a teacher at heart. We'll go school wise and go grade, A all the way down to F, whatever you think. But I just want to give folks an idea of what your assessment of where we are as an organization in achieving these big plays and our Project Moonshot 2031. So first of all, 2027 qualification core squad gains reps ahead of 2031. And I'm doing this not for Scott, folks. I'm doing it for you. He knows what the big plays are. He's probably got him tattooed on his back someplace so he doesn't forget. So that number 2, build the next generation qualification for U20s for the Junior World Championship and accelerate 18 through 23 age group. And finally, grow the base, develop and improve the competitive playing base with Anthem Rugby Charlotte Anthem Rugby Charlotte of USA eligible players. So Scott, let's take each one of those, give them a grade.
So I think in terms of the qualification and the senior team, I think we're sitting on a B for this year. There's some things that in terms of availability and injury, and some things that probably kept us from achieving what we wanted to overall. We got the main objective in the end, which was to qualify for the World Cup and start to build towards 2027. From a rankings perspective, in terms of where we're at, I thought we had a couple of opportunities there. We targeted Georgia as a game in November that we wanted to go after. Had we kept that within 6 points, we would have climbed in the rankings there. And had we held Romania out there at the end and got a bigger point differential, we would again climbed, which would put us in a better position for seeding for World Cup. So overall, we got the objective, but from a record perspective, we were looking for a winning record in this year, and we were 3-6, which turn of the dice could have been 5-4 very easily. And if we had accomplished Georgia, could have been a 6-3 year, which would be a good year for us from a record perspective. So in terms of our using the anthem and growing the base, I'd give that one a D. I would say the anthem was formed. I think World Rugby was really looking at investing in a team like a Penarol or a Selknam or a Drua, where they could get our best national team players together. And based on the way player signing and dispersal and league rules happened, the anthem were able to get some players, but we had to shift focus there, knowing that the Eagles weren't going to be able to be acquired based on the structure of the league. So we shifted focus to a younger group of players and went for more depth chart type players, more young players, and started to really look towards 2031 to see if we could figure out players for the World Cup after this coming one. And I think in terms of our 18 to 23, we are in the Junior World Championship. Now, the format changed since we set that objective, so we'll be in that this year. Last year, the Junior World Trophy was not held, so we did two things. We took we've always taken our U18s, so we've taken our U18s on tour last summer. We took the U19s. Didn't play the best competition for us, but we needed to get them together. So we took the 19s, and then we took the best of the 19s and the best of the 20s, and we put them together with some players into a U23 tour that went to South Africa. So, so we really made the best out of what was maybe a setback in terms of competition, but we were able to get 18s, 19s, and 23s, and then going into this year, we're putting specific focus on what I'd call the 2031 playing generation, which is probably sitting at about maybe some of the U20s, but 21 to about 26 years old right now. So really looking at drilling into that group and having a team below the Eagles that will focus specifically on that.
A bit of technical difficulty. Nevertheless, interesting. Now, maybe I missed it. Grow the base, that last one. What was your grade for that one?
Probably a B.
Okay.
Yeah.
So overall interesting. I like your candor. I appreciate your candor, I guess. Some coaches are always looking to pad the resume to, kind of look at, find the roses and show everybody those rather than some of the manure that goes into making roses beautiful, right? But your honesty and saying, look, qualification was a B. There were some ups and downs. Part of it was, injury availability, but the other part is we didn't just quite get the performances that we wanted in order to climb up and get in that next stage for 2027, kind of be in that playing group that we want to be in, and then building the next generation. A real honest assessment at a D, but again making the best of a challenging situation, just in terms of getting matches in front of guys that are that next generation, regardless of the caliber of the matches. It's good to assemble and get that time together, which we're going to talk more about that concept in a bit. And then of course, growing the base is a B. I want to ask a bit about this one, because you kind of talk about what World Rugby signed up for in terms of Anthem, trying to develop it, make it look a little like a Penarol or whatnot, some of what the South American teams are doing. It didn't quite come to fruition. So without being critical of other organizations, let me ask you this. In an ideal world for you, for World Rugby, what would Anthem look like if you had your way from the beginning?
I would look at the top 20 domestic players. So if we knew what the starting 15 was, plus a type 5, it usually comes off the bench. You don't want to concentrate too many players there, but I think if we were to draw that up and have that into one team, so we built that cohesion in the core of the team, and we built those shared experiences over the course of the year, plus an academy underneath that's involved with the age grade, in terms of using the USA Rugby reach to bring together some of the best players in the next generation at different points throughout the year. So if we drew it up, that's what it would be. If you look at Selknam, Penarol, they're playing, Chile and Uruguay are playing very, very well because they've got players that are in academies below those teams. They start to play together at a young age. They're developed under the same game model. Then they go up to the our Super Rugby Americas team. And then you look at Chile, who played Italy, was 95% homegrown in that last test. So we saw this coming. So when I was working for Gary, we saw what was happening in South America, and we really stemmed the tide. And we thought when we got the anthem, we thought it was an opportunity to accelerate international play. I'll tell you, talking to people in bigger unions and at Tier 2, the Eagles don't win in the time in camp. It's what happens the other 40 weeks out of the year. That's when, there's more time away than there is together. And so that's where a team like that could be very, very useful. I also think there's some other things that can be done based on the realities of where we are. And to your point, that's not anybody being critical. That's the nature of the business, right? We can't forget there's a league that's trying to break in as a sport. And that's a reality that we need to deal with. So when we come at it from a performance perspective and say things could be better from a performance perspective, that's not being critical. That's just being performance minded in terms of what we think there's ways. And so that's where we gotta have conversations. We have to be open to that collaboration going forward. And that's what we'll do this year and next.
It's funny, whenever we talk and it's many of the individuals that come on the show that are in a position like yours, whether it's GMs or coaches at a high level, at a high performance pathway, it always gives me a lot to chew on, a lot to think about. And you mentioned the likes of Chile. I mean, Chile's a team that historically we've just beat upon. They were like our redheaded stepchild for a long time, and now that's no longer true. And a big part of it is, as you say, is attributed to how they've structured their domestic team so that it was more aligned with their national team. So obviously that's helped. That's helped a lot of South American teams really grow. We've seen, you're right. You and Gary, when you were watching that, really saw that process. But I think one of the remarkable, and this is where fans are coming from, so I'm purely asking this from a fan perspective, I want to drill into this a little bit, is that one of the things that has always been said is very different about those South American countries is geographically they're smaller and playing base they're smaller, right? So it's a little easier for them to consolidate and use that top-down structure, top-down model. One of the things that's always gotten in the U.S. is rugby's, and I use that in not USAR, but in a much broader sense. One of the things that's always gotten in our way is geography and seasonality. Those are two, major problems. So, I guess I'd say that vision that you had, what World Rugby was looking for, what you were looking for, what USA Rugby was looking for, was that realistic given the geographic size, the huge playing base, the fact that sport in America is very much driven by the marketplace, by the desire to make money rather than solely on performance.
So all of those things you said, the last one is the key. Okay, so I think we think that our playing base is big. In numbers doesn't mean that the elite playing base is big. Mm-hmm. The elite playing base is small. Right. And I tell people, it's I'm looking for the 0.1% to play for the Eagles always. And so when we look at, so we take those two things and when you co-locate them, you take geography out of the mix, right? So if you have we've been doing talent ID until all that money was taken and put into the anthem, we were doing talent ID all around the country. So we had network, and we're still trying to do that today. And youth and high school has been awesome with what they've done with us on that. We've had more integration now with collegiate coaches who are also scouring the country, looking for the best talent to bring into scholarship programs. That's important. So you just got to use the network. It's different, but through that network, what you find is that there is a small playing base. That playing base is dispersed amongst multiple teams with multiple approaches, whether the coach is from Ireland or Argentina or is English or Aussie. They're all playing different styles. So they're dispersed amongst multiple teams. And our playing base is also very diverse. It looks like our country, right? So when Argentina takes the field, they're all Argentinians. Mm-hmm. When Chile takes the field, they're all Chileans. So there's shared experience from a very young age around how they see the game, how they play the game, the language that they speak, the coaches they've worked with. It's all very, very common, right? So when we get to the Eagles looks like our country. It looks like a melting pot from different places. That's why there's so many parallels to our military and our elite forces, and that they bring together people from all different backgrounds and try to get them on a purpose. The way you do that is you need time together, and you need clear standards. And in order to do those two things, it requires capital. So we can do these things. And like I said, we've had the anthem. The anthem, it was an opportunity the last 2 years, and now it's going to get better. If you look at some of the recruitment, there's going to be some things that are going to get better there this year with that cohesion. But it was an opportunity to make the country smaller and concentrate the talent. And I still think there's an opportunity to do that.
Gotcha. I want to circle back to that here in a little bit, but I don't want to get too far off a track of kind of focused on 2025 and assessing 2025 from an Eagles, HP standpoint. So real quick, I want to touch upon coaching staff. One of the guys I looked at when I was, playing was Alama Aramia, an All Blacks legend. He is departed from the coaching staff, and Augustine Chevalier, who came from Dallas, has joined the staff in his place and is taking over coaching of the anthem. Can you give fans a little bit of an idea of kind of what happened there, why the shift came from your staff, or if it was, other opportunities that presented themselves to Alama?
Al was fantastic for us, and he really put his heart and soul into the anthem and then into the national team. As the national team, as the Eagles began to turn over, and there was enormous turnover in terms of experience in the team leading from 24 to 25, there are coaches that work for teams at particular times. And depending on the maturity of the team and the playing base you're working with. So it wasn't an egregious thing. It wasn't a firing. It was simply we need to have different coaching skill set in both the anthem and inside of the national team that fits where the players are today and what's required. Al's still a very good coach, and will be able to coach many other places. And so it's not an indictment of him. It's the nature of where the team is today. If you look as well at bringing Augustine in, he's at anthem. He also came into the forwards. And I thought he was the right fit to sort out our line out leading out of PNC. And nobody's talking about that anymore. So the line out has been, was better, was sorted there in November. And so again, sometimes it's just getting the right coach and a new voice to fit in.
Okay. I appreciate that. And that's an interesting idea. The fact that sometimes you just, your team shifts, it changes, and with it, your staff has to shift and change too, to meet the needs that are required. You talked about the record, 3-6 overall for 2025, qualification. Of course, that was the big matzo ball, if you will, that was hanging out there. That's the one piece we wanted to make sure that we get right. But there were some key losses. Obviously, Canada, an opportunity right off the bat in PNC to qualify for 2027, a 34-20 loss. It's a team historically in the last 10 games that we played Canada, we've been 8-2. So, 1-1 under your coaching tenure. Spain was a loss at 31-20, or is it? Yeah, I think 31-20. And then Scotland 85-0. It wasn't the most. It's about 387 caps in that, starting 23 for Scotland. It's not the most experienced Scotland side. Key wins though: Samoa 29-13. That of course ushered in our ability that was qualifying All right, that was on the line. So obviously that was a key win. And then Romania, avenging a loss in 2024 in July. Of course, so that was retaining the Persian Cup. So, some ups and downs in there. So here's the question. Eagles fans, I think, were a bit frustrated with the results from 2025. Particularly, I think Scotland, they wanted to see a closer scoreline there. Canada, a bit of a frustration. So how can we put this season into perspective within the larger scheme of Moonshot, within the larger scheme of Gemini and where we're at?
Yeah, it's a big question. I think if you go back and you look at our historical record and where we were in terms of leadership. So when you say Scotland has 37 caps, let's not forget all those guys who came through grammar school together. 13 of them in the team were from Glasgow. That was 5 games into a URC season that played together all the time. So, there's an old saying, no man steps into the same river twice. The man is different and the river is different. And the point around that is that you see international teams rise and fall in performance. If you asked me if Australia was on the rise 4 months ago, I'd say yes. And if you ask me today, I'd say actually they did pretty well considering how tired they were and how many weeks on the road and everything they've had, which plays into international play. So think about that in the schedule. Spain and Canada highlighted one important point, something that we've known for a couple of years, which is much of our playmaking and much of our decision making came from AJ at 10. And so as we looked at going in, he was injured mid-game in Spain, and then had some things going on going into Canada, which put us in a position of almost a rebuild after the Canada game, kind of mid-year, in terms of getting the core cohesive pieces that we needed, the 9, 10, 12, 13 in particular, trying to get guys on form and back from that. So I think if you look at the games that we go, you know what, never explain, never make excuses. Spain was a game that was one that we felt like just got away from us. That was one we could have won. Unexpected performance from the back three in terms of drops. We had, guys that were 90% on high balls in the back three going into that game. Didn't expect that to happen, but good on Spain. They know how to beat us early in July. And then I think with Canada, I realized that one is a frustration. It didn't feel good. Doesn't look good on paper. I think when you look at it from a performance perspective, last qualifier, the U.S. went up to Canada. They lost. Canada is quite different. And as we were watching the MLR throughout the year, we realized the concentration of Canadian players and a couple of teams in the league put them in a better cohesive standpoint, and they had a high quality of player as well. Even though there was less, it was a pretty high quality in key positions. So we knew that one was going to be a tough one going up into Calgary, probably more tough than other stocked. And then I think we came out of that and really got a reboot and made Jason Dom the captain, which was a massive shift. So we got some good leadership in. And then we looked at, we knew where we were coming out of there. We knew that targeting Japan wasn't the right option. We thought that targeting Samoa a game later and having a fresh team on the park for Samoa, and then as a backup in case we needed to go home and away to Chile. So we put together a team and we just set some objectives in the Japan game to start making some progress, but we weren't targeting that game in particular. We went after Samoa, and so we were able to get some success there. I think with the team, what we're finding in the big objectives for next year is that we have guys that can do it being international play, particularly in some of the higher work rate positions for one international game at high intensity, struggling with health and ability to bounce back and do it for 2. And so that's the big thing this year is in order to build consistency when you look at less roster rotation and stuff is being able to get guys more robust throughout the year. As I said before, it's about the other 40 weeks that they come in, and when they're not in camp with us, not that we need to work more with teams in order to push them to international standard and make them more robust so that we can do it on a more consistent basis.
I find myself as I listen to you scribbling furiously just to kind of capture some of these moments and things that you've talked about. Again, going back to my point earlier, you always give me a lot to chew on. It's one of those things where, like, I wish someday I could just fly to Atlanta, carve out some time, and you and I could sit and have a pint or two and we could just chat, but because there is so much there. So I'd like to talk about this robustness for a moment. And there's some other key points that you brought up.
Can I come back, Rob? I want to talk a little bit about how the Scotland game reflects the overall landscape, because it's a really look. It hurts and it sucks and it's embarrassing and it ticks people off, and it should, to lose like that, and it hurts the team. It hurts the coaches, and then you're feeling bad enough, and then to have people that are supposed to love you hate on you is tough. It's difficult. Right. And we got to give these guys some credit because they take a lot of heat, right? For that. And all they've ever wanted to do is represent this country. And, and then to get abused after having this goal their entire life is pretty tough for some of those guys. And so we're working our way through that in the camp. But if we take Scotland, we go first 10 minutes, last 10 minutes, we're 49 of the 85 points. Okay. So we came in at halftime and the message was, we can't go replay the first half. So let's just go out and be the best we can. And let's try to win the second half. Okay. For 30 minutes in the second half, the score was 12-0 to Scotland. We had 2 scoring opportunities. We started to get our time and tackle up. We got our defense sorted, and we played where we should be, which is 12 points behind Scotland for 30 minutes at this particular time, right? So you go the first 10 minutes, you got a bunch of guys that have been running on their own, no competitive rugby. Some guys playing some club rugby, haven't been together in 7 weeks. They get 6 days together. You pop on a team against you're basically playing Glasgow at that point. And they were too fast for us, too good right in the beginning of the game. You get down 21-0, and now you're starting to doubt yourself. And what am I doing here, right? What was our plan, right? And so that creeps in. And then we have a good block, and then you get to the end. And this is where your question about robustness comes in, Rob, is that last 10 minutes after you've been chasing your tail for 70 and you want to start to take risks. That's when the score can go one of 2 ways, your way or the other way. Against Spain, taking risks at the end, went to 11 points. After we climbed our way back into the game, we started to take risks because we were behind. We went at Canada, 14-point differential in that game, started to chase. They had a purple patch of about 6 minutes in that game, and then we were chasing it after that. So my point is we want to be there in that last 70 to 80. And if you're paying really close attention to the test matches that are happening around the world, the teams with a stronger bench, that's where depth comes in, that are able to put the pressure on in the last 10 and close it out. Look at the new All Blacks Wales game from the weekend. Another example of closure. Look at the way Argentina was able to come back against England and the way they did it against Scotland. I think you can see that those last 10 minutes are going to be the gold minutes. And it's going to take us 20 months of physical development to be able to at least be in the fight when it comes to the next World Cup.
Well, and South Africa against Ireland, I think that's another one where South Africa just, if there is a team that defines exactly what you said, a team that's able to bring guys off the bench. Of course, the bomb squad, they come in and just are able to physically dominate in the scrum and the set piece altogether.
Yeah.
It just demonstrates exactly what you speak of.
But if
So,
you pull the chart from the number of test matches that they have together and time that they have together and the number of players used over the last couple of years in order to build that depth, you can see where it's come from. They were the highest. Yeah. They were the highest, had the highest number of games together as a team, right, going into the last World Cup in history. And so that happens not just there. It happens when they come up through our, the Springbok U20s, when they play for the Sharks together, or they play for Western Province, play for the Stormers. Like there's, it doesn't happen by accident.
Yeah. No, it certainly doesn't. And I think from behind the scenes, a lot of people that aren't there, that aren't in camp, that don't see a greater vision that your coaching staff does, they don't understand those nuances that you just spoke of. I think that's an important point. Everybody is able to be a critic until, you hold their feet to the fire and ask them how to manage all these things that you mentioned, whether it's, the injuries, or whether it's availability, or whether it's just, the lack of time together, or the lack of ability to build cohesion, all those things. And so to hear you speak about essentially you're talking about a bigger plan, the way you manage those games, the way you manage the rosters, the way you manage, how you're going to put a team together, and what games you were going to target. So it makes a lot of sense. I want to go back to one of the points earlier, and this is one of my big questions that's been creeping around for me in my mind for several years. And it goes to something you spoke to earlier when you said AJ went down, and now all of a sudden you guys kind of had to rebuild a little bit in that 10 spot. Obviously, Chris, Luke, right there in the mix right now. There are featured 10s. AJ probably not going to feature in 2027, just age and the miles on his legs, just he's experiencing a lot of injuries, probably not going to be there. So how do you build cohesion in that critical chaos, as Ben Darwin talks about, that chaos position? It's in the middle of the chaos. How do you build cohesion there, knowing that you've got Carty, who's going to figure into 2027, Hilsenbeck maybe. Don't know if Carty's going to figure into 2031. Hilsenbeck's probably not, again, due to age. Where is that next generation 10 coming from? How do you build cohesion within that pivot position that's critical to, make roses out of chaos?
So I think we have some young players that are coming through our age grade. So it's about exposing them to experiences in terms of playing with the players they might play with in 2031. So when we talk about that focus that we're putting on the 31 generation, I think something that is very tangible that we can put our hands on is to have a Falcons program that runs in the August to October timeframe, where we're pulling together the next group and putting them into experiences. We don't need to play another country. I'm headed overseas next week to talk to some teams about playing their midweek sides, doing some things like that. So I think it's bringing those players through, having a specific intentional focus on that. So, when my focus is on the national team and in camp and on 27, it's having, there's a member of the USA Rugby, my performance staff, that's focused on that next generation and their IDPs. So I think that's the big thing. I think we've got a challenge in that we've got some guys that are coming available at the beginning part of 27, and we'll make a decision in terms of whether or not they're included in the Eagles or it's too disruptive to the team in 27. If you go in and replace a 10 in the middle, it can have some catastrophic, regardless of their talent. Wings and fullbacks and back three, those guys can be chopped and changed. But those core game driver positions, we need to lock those down. So we're trying to do it at the Eagles level with Chris and Karts, and I wouldn't count AJ out just yet. He's on the rehab mend. He's done some incredible things before, but I think if we look at where we've got that going on right now, we start to develop that cohesion this year, really focused on locking in for 27 World Cup in early 26. And that's a big bet, because we're gonna have to pick some players that are gonna be there all the way through, and there'll be some guys who just won't be able to be included regardless of talent level, because we just won't be able to get the cohesion there. But if we put them into an environment where they are developing cohesion with other players leading up to 2031, or if needed into 27, then that's the way that we'll go about it.
All right, so you're leading to where I wanted to go, and that is that coaching culture podcast that you mentioned. Again, for fans, I'm going to show that below. Check that out if you haven't done so. It's worth a look, and I think there's a lot of good content from Ben Daring. But as he talks to Ben Darwin about the idea of cohesion, and kind of it's the foundation of building a culture within teams, and more within teams. I think he also talks about, structures, business structures too, for sure. So let's talk a little bit about that, because you mentioned cohesion and some of the you hint at some of the challenges to building cohesion within a structure. It's not just about finding the most talented player. You might find a talented player who could, blow the doors off the opposition. But if there's not the opportunity to create cohesion, or if there's a disruptive component to it, that can actually be detrimental. So my question is, what are the challenges to building cohesion in the Eagles as we, build towards 2027?
I think if you go look at probably where we're going to come into this professional season, we're going to have a number of the key kind of combinations are going to be spread across teams. So I think, and then we've got some guys like, I think Tavila Lepeti is maybe marked as a 13, but he's a 12 for the Eagle, and he's spent the last 6 months squaring up and being a playmaker off 2, right? And so he moves over to 13 now. And so there's the opportunity for us is to talk to teams about where it works for them, having guys in certain positions, looking at combinations that we think will work together. The nice part is Ruben and Mike and Chris will all be in one spot there in Chicago, but we'd like to see a tight 5 together in one team to begin to build that. But I think those are the challenges. So the way you work around those challenges is you try to create more shared experiences. If it's not going to happen week in and week out, then you get real clarity on the levels of conditioning, the levels of accuracy and skill set and physicality that you need in terms of your language. You give feedback on that. Work with the teams on the basic skill sets that work across, doesn't matter what system you're running, and making sure we have alignment on development of players coming through to do that. And then more time together with the Eagles. With a shortened season, there's more weeks in the year. That takes a capital infusion for us to get more weeks to be able to build that and to play more games. Not necessarily always test matches, but to play more games together is key.
So I'm going to try to bring together some of these components you just talked about, building cohesion in some key positions, mentioning it'd be ideal to have a tight 5 that and an Eagle tight 5 that's starting together in an MLR team. Obviously, there's going to be some challenges to that. You did mention that with the Hounds, though, having Chris at 10, having Ali, he might just be at 13 with Ali at 12. So he might get into his Eagles position there, which might have been the attraction for him to sign on with the Hounds, by the way. So you've got some opportunity there. But more than that, the greater question, and let me just go back to Darwin. He talks about like Ireland have gotten much better over the past probably decade to half decade, because there is a consolidation of teams and much more top-down structure within the IRFU, right? And New Zealand has that top-down structure, in the way they do things. So my question goes to, and it's almost two parts here. So one's a little bit more macro, one's a little bit more micro. First, does the consolidation in the league, is there actually an opportunity here performance-wise for the Eagles, having fewer teams, being able to consolidate, potentially consolidate some of those partnerships and pairings to create that cohesion you mentioned? And as a follow-up to that, how much influence or how much of a conversation do you have as head coach of the Eagles with these domestic league teams in the MLR?
Well, always have a conversation, and all of the GMs and all of the coaches are very good to work with. And we just have to remember they're trying to put a team on the field. Their incentives are based on best team trying to win, and they work with us on a lot of things. There are going to be limits to what they can do, and those are perfectly they're understandable in terms of what they do. Now, having less teams to work with, again, it's intensity over extensity. So you get the ability to work with less connections, less to manage, more concentrated playing pool. That allows you to take the resources that we have and concentrate them more on less coaches, less players, which is nothing but a positive thing from a performance perspective going forward.
Okay, so that's interesting. I want to build on the MLR kind of perspective a little bit before we get too far away from it. So I don't know the white elephant in the room. The MLR is consolidated. It's gone through some financial challenges. Owners have backed out, pulled the plug, so to speak. How do we, as a rugby community, how can fans soldier on without being worried or concerned about domestic rugby being a part of our shared rugby experience in the United States? What can we give fans something to latch onto?
Well, there's certainly been some headwinds there, but I'm since my days at Rugby ATL, I'm not in the boardroom there. So I think that's that's up to the owners and what happens there in the league. I think the key thing is it's a cliche, but can't worry about things you can't control. Just buy tickets, buy merchandise, go to the game, enjoy it. Support right? Seriously, just go support teams, right? That's what you can do. That's how you can help. That's how you can put it in, tell your friends, just make an effort to grow. Stop crapping on the MLR teams.
Right.
Like, seriously, just give them a break. Just, they're just like, us in this regard, and that they're really trying to do something here. Right. So go buy your tickets and be a part of it and support them and stop the negative crap and just, let's all go, hey, look, we all got a piece of this, and take your kids, put your kids in their clinics, and take them out to their academies and just support the teams. That's the best we can do,
Amen to that. It's funny. I obviously in my role and what I do, I pay a lot of attention to social media, and I just get a kick out of all those people that are always crapping on MLR owners. Hey, we should have a team here. Hey, we should do this. Hey, we should do that. Hey, just buy tickets, buy merch, bring friends, do something that you can do to help support the effort. If we have more bums in seats, right? we're going to get more eyes on the game. We have more eyes on the game, the more interest is going to be from ESPN or NBC or whoever else to broadcast games. Now, all of a sudden, we're going to get the interest of advertisers. We're going to develop more commercial partners. But it starts with us as fans to take a vested interest and stop complaining and bitching and pissing and moaning and get our asses to games and support the teams that do exist.
Exactly. And one thing we do really well is we eat our own. In the community too much, right? And that's that's not all to blame. I mean, it's a tough market, sports market to join into, but I think we got to get out of the toilet bowl mentality, right? And just start to move forward. Now, with that said, there's a real opportunity here for us when we think about the fall, and I talk about that next generation. Like, there's a group of players that are coming out of the MLR because of the shrink, that are good players that love the game and need a place to coach and play. So there's an opportunity in the club setup. I think there's a real opportunity for a fall competition that involves all of the domestic players who are not contracted, right? Because our current club rules, I think in Chicago, it's down to what, like 2? You can have like two pro players, I think, in your game day roster for a league game or something like that. Those players, they're getting games and it's good for the club, but probably not the level to prepare them for their next MLR season that they want. So I think there's a real opportunity. I mean, think of it as an opportunity for some of the more established clubs to maybe grow again. It's some of the stuff we did with the ARP, that it's an opportunity to put those in place. And I know Chicago did a lot of stuff with the academy, and St. Louis was involved with having some players play as well. So I think there's an opportunity to grow the club game again as well.
You're talking about the Chicago Academy, and the St. Louis club players are going to make me cry. Real quick, I just want to, before we get too far away from the MLR, because there are a couple other questions, and I don't want to take too much of your time today. As we talk about the MLR high performance Eagles, I have to ask this question. Earlier this fall, I believe it was on September 17th, you had a conversation with Will Hooley on the Rugby Rundown, and you said it's time to stop funding Canadian and Pacific Islander pathway. It certainly caught the attention of a lot of Canadian fans, especially MLR fans, people who are hanging in there watching this show, watching other shows, paying attention to the MLR. It rubbed them the wrong way. And I don't want to get into that part of it. What I'm interested in is about a month later, or a little less than, the MLR releases their statement in light of all the chaos from the summer and the fall. They say there's aligned vision on supporting USA Rugby, and this is from the owners. The MLR will take steps from the 2026 season to increase game day space for USAR qualified pathway players. We're going to see a minimum of 16. We're also going to see Canadian players defined as internationals. Was this just coincidental that your comments come and then the MLR kind of shifts its focus and vision? Or was there a more aligned approach between the MLR and USAR as they kind of came off the back end of some of the catastrophic news?
Yeah, I knew at the time that there were some grumblings around there may be a change in the MLR, but I think when you talk about aligned, I think we're aligned in that we want to. We're not aligned in the how to yet. And those are the conversations I keep talking about, the collaboration that need to be open. If the desire is to support the Eagles, and I think it is a true desire, and it's heartfelt and it's intentional, then ask the people who are running the Eagles how we can do that, and let us ask you. And I think that's the next step here, Rob, is when I made that statement, we knew that teams were contracting, and my point at the time was there are going to be less places available. this is now an opportunity for all the reasons we talked about: concentration of talent, intensity, overextensity on the top players, etc. And it's my job to make the Eagles perform. I love Canadian players. I love Canadians. My stepdad's a Canadian. Has nothing to do with that. It's my job. It's my job to try and promote the Eagles, and sometimes that doesn't always agree with everyone, and it shouldn't. There should be passionate Canadian fans who hate me for it, and that's okay. I've got to do what's best for the United States.
Well, you know what they say, and Scott, the big guy for our shout out to you, my friend. ABC, always beat Canada. So that's the key, right?
Yeah.
Always beat Canada. Let me, as we start to close out our conversation again, and I certainly appreciate your time. It's coming at an awesome time, I think, to digest what's happened over 2025 for the Eagles, but it's also coming at a great time for the Rugby Rant as we close out season 6 and have an eye on season 7. I don't know if this is a fair question, Scott. Although what I do know is that you're a commercially minded person. You obviously have been in business. You've been involved with Oracle. You understand commercial partnerships. You understand the importance of funding. You mentioned it earlier.
Yeah.
Does the United States rugby community, and I don't mean USAR fans, I'm talking about us as a community. That's everybody. That's everybody that's pays dues. It's everybody that coaches. It's everybody that officiates. It's everybody that pays to go in the gate, sees a game, watches on TV, whatever you do in our rugby community. Do we need to centralize the commercial partnerships in order to create more financial viable market for our sport with an eye on 2031 to make that a successful endeavor?
I think if you're talking about headline sponsors that are, kind of national or even multinational, I think there is something to be said at the central kind of brand and sponsor level for that. So I think commercially that's good. I still think there's a space for hyper localization within the clubs that we've seen, and I think you have to. That's critical to grow and to get stickiness, so to speak, on the customer side or the fan side at the local environment for when the World Cup does come and it's in their city. I think that's important to keep it going. So I can't say that it's it's all centralization. That's quite difficult. Partnerships are really hard, especially when there's multiple people involved. But I would say headline sponsors, one or two, would probably be a good thing. And those who see the benefit and reaching all the way from the professional game into the community could be beneficial.
Yeah, agreed. I've had a lot of conversations with Todd Dammers, who's the forwards coach for the Hounds, about just that as an Australian. He's certainly experienced his fair share of World Cups, and with Australia hosting in 2027, he understands that. It's interesting. I had a conversation with Tim Brown, who's our rep here in the United States for Macron, and he just talked about, for example, Macron just every kid that signs up for Imagine Rugby, or every high schooler that pays dues gets a training shirt. USA Rugby on it, Macron on the back. Just to strengthen that partnership and pathway, and get the brand with eyes on, and get investment, all the way around from both sides. So I think you're right. Those one or two big headline sponsors, hell, you can get a McDonald's or a Coca-Cola right there in Atlanta, a big headline sponsor, or maybe it's Gallagher, to go on the back of that T-shirt. So now you've got any kid who signs up is going to be wearing and emblazoned with these headline partners, and get them to lock in for more than just a season or two, get them to lock in for several, so that not just with youth rugby, not just with USA Rugby, but also with the MLR, so that it's a more cohesive, we talked about cohesion, but more cohesive management
Sure.
of commercialization to get those investment partners.
Yeah.
So great stuff. One last question before we go out, kind of scaling back here, but I skipped over this one and I want to make sure I hit it. Moving forward, 2026, Jason Dam. You worked with him at Rugby ATL, obviously. Why is he the right captain for this team?
Never seen anyone like him at the Eagles level. I think Jason is naturally cool under pressure. If you look at him, he leads the team in physicality and dominant tackle. So how do you build trust in the captain? Well, first of all, you got to have your respect in his play, and his play generates that respect. The second thing is that you need to be able to be selfless and focused on the team. And everything Jason says and does is focused solely on the team. And he has a high level of integrity. He does what he says he's going to do. So he's got a high. It's a different type of captain. I'm telling you, this generation needs a different type of captain. So Jason doesn't look like the captain of my day or your day, or he doesn't look like a captain in England. He looks like a U.S. based captain. He looks and sounds like one who knows what the men need from his actions and from what he says. So the impact of Jason not being available for July took us 2 months to get over. You combine that with the best player in a key position and the captain missing. We knew we were in for a bit of a bumpy ride. But he's in place now, and he's been in place, and he's doing a great job with what we call FIDO, which is the leadership group. And so I think, he's in a great spot. And Jason didn't arrive there just this year. We started with Jason back in the Rugby ATL days, like we started with Vili Halu and Marno Riddelinghuis and all these guys with leadership development, professional habits and preparation, etc. So to see them come through on the other side of the Eagles and work very, very hard in camp and do it in the right way is rewarding, and also a reminder that it takes time.
Yeah. So first of all, Scott, I never had a day. Okay. No. But honestly, I got to ask this real quick, because you mentioned at his position, is he an 8 or a second row?
He's probably he's an 8 by nature. I think I think we were based on just what came through on the injury front with Sam Gala and CC Mahoney and Ricker Hadding, all these guys that were off injured this year. We pushed Jason into 5 because he understands that back 5 power is the key to a scrum. So he scrums really, really well. And instead of going, if you don't have Greg Peterson at 6'9", then you need then you got to have 3 or 4 guys in your pack that are 6'5". So 6'5" lifting 6'5" can be similar to 6'1" lifting 6'9". So you just I think he has the ability to play both. I think playing in the second row all through the LA season was really good for him, because again, it just pushes the level of robustness that he needs to do it. And then this tour, we rotated him from 5 to 8 to manage his load as a captain, because he was always going to be on for 80 minutes, and he played well at 8 in that last game. Yeah,
interesting analysis. I'd never really thought about some of those things in those terms, but it makes a bit more sense when you structure it in that way. One last thing I want to touch upon before we close out here. You mentioned Jason Dam, just his selflessness, his focus on the team, and what he does in that regard and that makes him the leader for this team at this time, for what they need. Again, a zoomed out approach. So I look at USA Rugby community and I'm thinking about, for example, the collegiate pathway. For a while, I looked at it to some degree at the MLR component. Do we need to do? I mean, sometimes I think there are too many egos. Not enough people are focused on a larger vision. Some of the things you talked about earlier, creating that alignment. How can we, as a pathway, whether it's MLR, college, youth, academy, whatever have you, asking the question, how can we align ourselves? And do we need to have an ego adjustment at some of those levels in order to get on board and create alignment and move our high performance structures forward?
Great question. Do we need, or what's possible, right? Like, I wish, I got a 16-year-old boy upstairs who could use an ego adjustment. And if I can't do that, then I'm sure as heck not going to do it across a bunch of grown people. But I would say I've had a really interesting conversation because we're picking a small group of coaches from the collegiate game that we're really going to invest into. So we've been doing some sharing of information and some TD with the collegiate coaches, and some calls and sharing of videos and things. But we're going to invest in a specific group. And I say this like hand on heart, having grown up in this environment, is the nuances of the game are not something that is inherent in our greater community. There are people that have it, but on a general whole, because it's not a mainstream sport with generations playing it and watching it, it's not. So we tend to default to things that interest us, like making sure guys are in the right position or gals in the right position for a 1-3-3-1, or coming up with 3 different calls coming into a lineup, because we're generally educated people, and that's the stuff that we can understand. Where to place your hand on the ball, or how to attack the inside shoulder, or how to adjust your defense based on whether the defender inside you is picked off by a downline or not, is not something that's inherent in our DNA. But it is, regardless of ego, if you're able to skill yourself up on the basics of the game, have clear standards around those basics, and not get detracted by strategies and schemes, you will win. So you can satisfy your ego, and you'll develop players, or not your ego, but we're all competitive. We don't play sports not to win, not to try and win. So you will develop players that are going to go into the next level. Because I'll tell you, in the pathway, the Eagles now are a product of the last 10 years. So what you see on the field is what's happened in the last 10 years, not in the last 24 months, right? That it's a very small influence on it. So when we're talking about developing the next group of players, the game's going to change. The game will change, but the basics of the game hopefully will not. So, be good, be technically accurate, especially in contact. Be technically accurate. There's a lot of discussion. Every kid is a leader, but I can tell you this is a leaderless generation, in my opinion. A lot of sheep, right? So invest, be intentional. We're very intentional with our leadership group in doing leadership development, not team leadership development, but real leadership development, not the stuff you read on your social media about you're a natural leader and you're a lion and everybody else is a lamb. Like, that's crap, right? There's a method to that. So I think my point is like, enjoy it. Really teach yourself the basics. Try to go teach the players. Understand that you're going to fail and you're going to fall down and that you're going to learn as you go, right? Absorb all of that, and you'll win. You'll produce really good teams. And if you don't believe me, go watch the top 6 teams in the world through November and tell me how complicated their schemes are, or how well they're just good timing, hard lines, time under the ball, quick transfer, accuracy in the tackle area. They're accurate in the contact area with no care for their bodies, right? But don't go for the no care for their bodies, because that's where we go. We just need the best athletes, and we just need them to go smash each other, and we'll be really good. The world's moved past that, right? The technical parts of the game are massively important and prepare kids for the next level.
It's interesting. You mentioned that idea of watch those top teams, watch them over the course of November, and just watch, their schemes. Yeah, they have technical schemes, but is that where they make their money? not necessarily. I mean, we just talk about 26%, I think, of all international tries are scored from a rolling maul. So you think about as you go back to those technical pieces you mentioned, you got to get it right at the line out. So you need a technically accurate throw. You need a technically your communication at the at at line out time with the jumpers and where you're going to throw that ball.
Yeah.
And then you need to communicate at that rolling maul so that the ball's at the back and nobody's coming through the middle of it.
Yeah.
All those things are technical pieces, finite details, but it's nothing that nobody is. It's no mystery there. There's no behind the veil mystery as to what that scheme is. It's simple, but it's all the technical pieces. I think that represents what you're talking about, Scott.
Absolutely. I mean, I think all of those things, it's like understanding and leveraging that that a kick is now a third set piece. And if you understand that, right? Because it's boring if you kick. The kick is the start of an attack now. And if you watch the game closely and you watch the way the Eagles evolved and what we're doing with the players that we've got, you'll see that has come into the game. We'll go watch these games from the weekend. Watch how many contests in the air. Watch the scraps. Watch what they do with the ball after the scraps or the catch, right? Like, it's a massive part of it. So you're always going to have triple threat, run, pass, kick. How often do we teach kicking?
Yeah.
Right? That guy's really big and fast. He should be on the Eagles. Oh, he can't kick? Well, that doesn't matter.
Or he can't catch. Or he can't pass.
Right. Yeah. So I think, I think that's he can't defend. Oh, but he scored a really sweet try. Yeah, but he can't defend. Right. So I think it's again, it's not, people are doing their best. I always tell, people are really doing their best. I've come up, I've done it, working a job, putting together practice plans at 1:00 in the morning before I go to the office the next day. I get it. I just say, focus your time on the basics of the game and try to do things really, really well, and invest in yourselves and put it onto the players.
100%. Very, very enlightening elements there. Very important of everybody remember. And just as an aside, Scott, I mentioned ego before. I do feel that there needs to be an ego check in many aspects of rugby in the United States. People need to ask themselves what it's all about. And I think undoubtedly, whatever level of rugby that you're in, and I'm speaking to fans out there who are coaches or who are refs or who are involved in admin, I encourage you to get involved, even if you've never played the game. We need people to run organizations. We need moms to put on the team, the high school team get together afterwards to celebrate what rugby does and what it means to us as a community. We need all those people, but at the core, everybody needs to put away their ego and remember, why are we doing this? We're doing this because we want rugby to elevate in the United States, and one of those ways is through the HP pathway. So we want to see, our U.S. Eagles get better. We want to see success, and ultimately we want to see success in 2031. And I know Scott has a plan, and everybody, I've been a proponent of Scott for years. I've talked about why he was the right man for this job. And if you haven't looked at Moonshot 2031, do yourself a favor and look at it, not just the macro components, but the granular pieces where it talks about specific players, specific positions, and some of the details. Look at it. And if you don't come away still believing that Scott's, believing that Scott needs to move on, then you're dead wrong. Okay. He has a vision to get us there, and he has all my confidence and support. So Scott, I appreciate your time. Always indebted. You always have an open door to come on the Rugby Rant and share your thoughts, because clearly an hour and 13 minutes in, and there's probably some unsaid questions, but I know you've got family to enjoy, you've got work to do, so I'm going to let you get to it. But thank you very much for your time, Scott. I certainly appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Rob. And I appreciate the hard questions, and they need to be asked, right? That's the way that we make progress, is we ask the hard questions, and we don't make excuses, and we never explain. Right? We just ask the hard questions and then try to find some ways. And I just want to reiterate, it's like people like you who are saying, just get behind teams, just enjoy the sport, just participate in it, try and enjoy it, right? Like, when's the last time you saw a good comedy movie? They don't exist. Everything's drama these days, right? So you know, just enjoy it, and get back to loving the sport. And I think from our perspective, we're going to keep fighting at the Eagles level, and I do think we are in a period now where we have the next 2 World Cups guaranteed. Mm-hmm. But we're at a junction point that before March of 26, we're going to have to start these conversations, and there has to be collaboration. If that is truly the goal, if the social media backs up the action, those conversations need to occur. So I'm looking forward to having those.
100%. Well, you're always welcome to have a conversation with the Rugby Rant. We appreciate your time. I want to wish you and your family all the best in this holiday season. And of course, I wish your endeavor with the Eagles, your continued trajectory into Moonshot. I wish you all the best. And I thank you so much for joining the show. And once again, folks, we're going to take a bit of a hiatus over the course of December, but we'll be coming back in January, talking to GMs across the MLR. Again, just having that conversation about how they build rosters in the current climate of the MLR. And hopefully we'll get some time with Scott later on down the road in 2026 as he gets into March and beyond and begins to prepare for 2027 in Australia with the Rugby World Cup. Thanks again, Scott, for joining the Rugby Rant podcast show.
Thank you.
And fans, I think we've done it. We're down and dusted. We're at the Rugby Rant. We aim to grow rugby one fan at a time, and we'll see everybody at the next. Thanks.